Tonight we're leading off with a story on the Joint Office of Homeless Services. Now, it was dreamed up as a central clearinghouse for both the City of Portland and Multnomah County to coordinate their efforts on dealing with the homeless issue. A new development and a story from our friends at Willamette Week shows the office has basically been navigating blindly without consistent data to guide it since it started 8 years ago. And yes, that does make that our big story tonight. The issue of whether the Joint Office of Homeless Services knows what it's doing is kind of a big one because it takes in hundreds of millions of dollars of your tax money, then distributes that money to a couple of hundred nonprofits who are part of the effort to help with the problem. One of the big criticisms over the last few years is that nobody in the system knows who specifically is being helped and whether that help is making any difference. We get stats and the numbers of people helped, but it's hard to know, for example, if the same person was helped 2 or 3 times or if that was 2 or 3 different people. And now a report from Willamette Week reveals that the office has not known that sort of specific information since its beginning. We think that is worth your while. The headline reads, after a long wait, Multnomah County takes big step toward better understanding who's homeless and what services they need. And then the subheading gets to the real heart of the story. 8 years after the creation of the Joint Office of Homeless Services, the office controls the data. The report is done by Nigel Jaquist, without question, one of the very best investigative reporters around. I had a chance to ask him about his report and that fact that for the past 8 years, the Joint Office did not have this database showing who is homeless and what services they need.
Yeah, it's really remarkable. Since the Joint Office was formed in 2016, you would have thought that system would have moved over from where it used to reside at the Portland Housing Bureau almost immediately. There's been a lot of wrangling between the city and the county. There's been a lot of conversation, but in fact, it took nearly 8 years until March 25th for the county Joint Office to get control of the system.
Sometimes I think it's frightening to learn about all the things going on behind the scenes. So the real story here is not that they now have the information, because as Nigel is going to tell us in a moment, it has some value, but it's not great. The real story is that for 8 years, the Joint Office has operated essentially blind.
I think that anybody would recognize that in any human endeavor, data is helpful. So who's out there? What services do they need? What services have they used in the past? You would be able to analyze from that data what projects or what services are effective in reducing homelessness. We really haven't had any of that data. The limited data that the system currently contains is largely inaccessible to the nonprofits who provide services. It's largely inaccessible to many of the government partners, and the data itself is very incomplete. So the consultant who looked at this said there are about 50 different things that you would like this system to be able to tell you. It can only tell you 8 of those. And again, hardly anybody can access the information that's contained in those 8 fields. So it is a system in name only. It's an outdated, almost useless system. Now the county has control of it, Pat, and remarkably, they've told us that it's going to take another 3 years to replace it with something that actually provides the data the county wants.
I can just sense a lot of viewers throwing things at the TV, not because they're angry at you, but just because they're so frustrated. How could this thing be going on for so long and be consuming so much money, and they still don't have any metrics?
Well, I think it's one of those cases when everybody's in charge, nobody's in charge. The Joint Office is a joint venture between the city and the county. The city and the county elected officials often don't get along. They've treated this as a turf battle rather than something that could be useful in alleviating the humanitarian disaster on our streets. And nobody has really put his or her foot down and said this is unacceptable.
How about that? Well, I think we ought to talk about how much money has gone through this office in the last 8-9 years. I crunched the numbers this afternoon because I was kind of curious. Using county budget reports, I found that from 2017 through 2023, the total is $444,682,583. The budget last year was $280 million. Now, we don't know the budget for 2025, which starts on July 1st, but if it's only the same as 2024, taxpayers will have spent $1 billion on the homeless issue in the last 9 years. And that's just focused on Multnomah County and Portland. More money has been spent by individual counties and the state of Oregon.